Hello, hello, baddies.
Hello. Happy Thursday or Friday's Eve, as I always say. I hope everybody's doing well. How are you doing, Jasmine?
Okay, how are you?
I'm doing good. Doing good. Glad it's almost the weekend here. Winding down to the end of the week.
Yeah, it's almost that time. Hallelujah.
Yes. And I hope everybody is enjoying. I know that there's been like some crazy weather going on. So we're definitely sending some extra love to our baddies who were in the Texas area and just all over the country because I know winter storms have been ravishing our whole country. We started out with some here in Seattle, and I know it's just progressively gotten worse across the country. So we're definitely sending you love and prayers today to everybody that's watching.
And if you haven't seen on Instagram, Hip Hop Happy Hour, they are hosting a party with a purpose tomorrow, raising money. It seems like the powers with the people, and so that's how the donations are getting distributed, so that we can actually get some feet on the ground. There are so many people suffering right now, so many families suffering, and it's devastating. It's really
Yeah.
sad to see all the imagery going on. So our hearts are definitely, but our actions are going to be with our baddies as well as we go on to help raise funds for them and hopefully get them some help.
Yes. So definitely tune in tomorrow, Hip Hop Happy Hour on Instagram. If you just go to at Hip Hop Happy Hour, and I believe they go live at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time. So definitely take a look. And I know you can donate anytime. They'll probably have a donate button in their Instagram stories. Or if you want to donate and you can't, you don't know how, definitely reach out to Jasmine or I, and we can definitely help you get there for sure.
And the other thing is that sharing the content is also helping because maybe you don't have it, but somebody you know has it. So keep that in mind. There's always a way to help. So today I am like black on black because one is Black History Month,
Yes.
and two, we're going to talk about Black breast cancer matters. So for us, we were very intentional about creating a community that wasn't just for Black women, but was for women of color. So Black women are women of color, but women of color is an inclusive term for all non-white women. And so I think first year, our big was how do we take a stand without building separation? Because this is a community, this is a collective. And I think as we brought on our ambassadors and we have more women that represent other demographics, that can
Mhm.
represent other demographics and represent for the rest of us in those demographics, I think now we have the responsibility of helping our sisters learn about each other's challenges so that we can pull each other along. Like the saying is that if you want to go fast, go along. If you want to go far, go together. And we're really trying to go together.
Right. For sure. And definitely, like you said, because it is Black History Month, we definitely want to shout out all of our Black baddies that are out there and just highlight them and definitely know that you're out there and that we see you. And so this show is definitely for you. So if you have anything that you want to add to the conversation, definitely type it in the comments because we want to answer any questions or just shout you out real quick, whatever you have to say.
South Carolina in the house, shouting that out real quick. Um, so tonight we have two special guests. They are a couple of OG advocacy baddies, and we're excited because we've been doing this work for a while. Marissa and I are really new, but we hit the ground running. And so tonight we want to talk about the disparities. We want to touch on that a little bit, but one thing I've been telling people is that we talk a lot about the disparities. We don't talk enough how to address them, the work that's being done to move forward. And these ladies have definitely had their hands in the mix. So, ladies, I'm telling you that I had to trim your bios down because you do so much. You can do so much. And we're going to give you a chance to speak to it when you're on. But our first guest is Tiah Tomlin. After being diagnosed with negative breast cancer, as she calls it, Tiah Tomlin lost breast years ahead of motherhood, an online support community created to help women for living in the greater Atlanta area. She uses this group to connect women, share resources, and provide support, ensuring that no sister walks alone. She also co-founded My Style Matters, Inc., a 501 grassroots nonprofit that is dedicated to supporting, empowering, advocating, and educating cancer survivors, caregivers, and the community at large about breast cancer and cancer prevention in an effort to end disparities. It is her mission to offer programs that will educate, motivate, and activate to take charge of their health. Let's welcome Tiah to the screen.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. Thanks
Hey,
for having
Tiah.
me.
How are you?
Hello.
I'm doing well. It's down here in Atlanta, hot Atlanta, as they normally call it. It's not too hot here. It's cold and rainy, but I'm doing okay considering.
Yeah.
It was 85 in Jacksonville today. Like, I think the world is like
Really?
broken because it was like 30 last week. And today it's
Really?
85.
Yeah,
Are
I'm
you
like, you're just
bragging?
gonna rub it in. Just gonna rub it in that it's
Right.
85.
I can't complain considering everything that's going on in the world right now. So, hey.
Yes. So our next guest, I'm going to give her a minute because she's walked away from her screen, but she's back. Is Ricki Fairley as a stage 3A triple negative. So we have two triple negative baddies here tonight. Triple negative breast cancer survivor thriver. Ricki's personal purpose, passion, mission, ministry, and blessing is to bring focus, attention, research, and action to eradicating Black breast cancer and supporting and coaching what she calls her breasties through their breast cancer experience. Ricki is an award-winning seasoned marketing veteran that has transformed her strategic acumen into breast cancer advocacy. Ricki also co-founded Touch, the Black Breast Cancer Alliance, to address Black breast cancer as a special disease state with the overall goal of reducing the mortality rate for Black women. Let's welcome Ricki to the screen. Hey, Ricki.
Hey, Ricki.
Hey, Ricki.
I think
You're on mute.
Yeah.
Hey, I was trying to keep my dog from barking. I wish to get my dog so I can hold her here so she won't bark.
Nice. So how are you doing tonight, Ricki?
I am great. How are you guys?
We're doing good.
So we're gonna hop right in there because I said I cut so much from your bios, but you ladies have been doing advocacy work for a long time. So Ricki, we'll start with you. Someone said the other day that the way overcome breast cancer and then turn around and reach back for the others is like something they've never seen with any other disease. So I want to know, after you had your experience, what inspired you to go from your personal journey to breast cancer advocacy?
So, the Breasty Club is not one you want to be in, right? But once you're in it, I feel like we have unconditional love for each other. And no matter who loves you in your life, no one can love you the same way a breastie can love you, right? And so I went to work really because when I got diagnosed, so I'll be 10 years in October, which is so huge. I'm such a miracle, right? But when I went to Google on triple negative, whatever, 9 years ago, it basically says you were going to die. You're going to die. There's no treatment options. There are maybe 5 things on Google. So there was no information about triple negative. And there was nothing to learn about. So I reached out to the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation, which had only been around for about 3 years at the time, 3 or 4 years. But they were kind of the go-to place, and they still are. I've been on their board pretty much since I was sick. But they were the resource to go to get information. And so when I got better, I felt like I had to help other women with TNBC because we just didn't have anything to help. We didn't have anything. And so I felt this need to provide information, provide resources, or just give a hug, because I really didn't meet anyone who had triple negative until I was 2 years out.
Wow.
And another patient. So, and definitely not anybody Black. It was interesting. I went to an LBBC conference to speak on behalf of the TNBC Foundation, and I found myself for the first time in a room with 80 other women with TNBC, and 60 of them were Black. But that was 2 years after I finished treatment. So, I felt the need that we had to have a voice. I needed to amplify a voice for our women. And I love all my breasties, all of them. But, as with TNBC, we fight a different fight. We have a different disease because there's no, we're the only breast cancer that doesn't have a preventative drug to prevent recurrence. And so our fight is different. Our battle is different. And so I felt like we needed more information and love and resources. And so that's really why I went into advocacy. And what I also learned that when I started talking to breasties, when they got finished with treatment, there's a sort of fire in you that makes you want to tell somebody. And I feel like it gives us strength and power to help another breastie.
Absolutely.
Your mind off of all the crap that you're going through when you can help somebody else. And so I kind of channeled that energy into, okay, all right, I'm going to work. Like we all have to work around here because it makes you feel better. Makes you feel better. And there's so much work, too much work.
There is so much work. So Tiah, what about you? How did you move beyond your personal experience into breast cancer advocacy?
Yeah, well, it actually started when I heard the words "it's cancer," and of course, I had an emotional breakdown. And God just spoke to me. And one of the things that I said back to him, I said, God, you see me through this. I'm going to go back and help as many women as I can. I knew this was not about me. It was bigger than me. And so while I was going through my journey, my company was laying off at the time. And I had to be really quiet about it. And living in Atlanta, most people who are here aren't from here. So in that case, we don't have like a big support system. My family's not here. You know, you just kind of rely on your friends. And so when I was going through my treatment, I had a lot of questions. I was 38 years old, you know, a Black woman, no kids, no husband. And I just had 1,000,001 questions. And I went to support groups, but nobody looked like me. It was older white women. And not that I had an issue with them being old or white. They just couldn't answer the questions that this 38-year-old young Black girl had. And so I would go to the infusion center and I'm like, okay, I see Black girls here, but where are we in terms of the support? And so God just put it on my heart to start my own thing. I reached out to several organizations that support Black women and nobody followed back up. Nobody reached back out. And I was really disappointed. And I was like, I don't want anybody to feel the way that I feel. And I actually was going to start a group for Black women across the globe. But what really hit home for me, I was in a bunch of Facebook groups. And I said, you know, I don't want to be in another Facebook group where people are just sending emoji prayers and things of that nature. I want people to be able to connect, love up on one another, and touch each other. And so I started the sisterhood, My Breast Years Ahead. And it's intended for women living in the greater Atlanta area because I wanted women who live here to, you know, when you're having a bad day, you can say, hey, girl, hey, you know, where are you? I'm on my way to come see you. Or, hey, I go to this doctor and I'm having this experience with this particular doctor. Or, hey, this is a great doctor. You know, I wanted it to be more community. And not to say that you don't create community across the pond, but it's the connection is a little bit different when you can touch and hold and see each other and love up on each other and sit in treatment with each other and cry with each other. It's different. And at that time, you know, we didn't do a lot of the streaming, kind of what we're doing now, and to see it grow, it's just amazing. But that is what pushed me to do the advocacy. And even when I was going through my treatment, there was just a lot of gaps, a lot of things that was not shared with me. Watching, I had one girl who I went through, it was 3 of us that had triple negative, crazy. And we all sat beside each other, 3 Black girls. And one of the ladies, how she ended up being found out about her diagnosis is she just came in town from New York just to check on her condo. She didn't have a car here. And so she had gotten a notice that it was time for her to get her mammogram. And she went in and she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She had no family here, nothing. And so she would have to literally catch the bus and then walk. She would 2 buses and then walk to the infusion center from the train station. And just seeing what she was going through and not having the support and people letting her down, that just touched me in a big way. And I was like, you know, who's helping her? You know, even at the infusion center with the, you know, the patient navigators or the social workers, they're not talking to us and having those conversations. And I said, you know what? I got to be a part of the solution. And that's when I got started. So.
Love it.
Yeah, that's great.
I think that give us our purposes, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you move from, you know, and before I was diagnosed, I was I'm a workaholic. And I went from, well, I had a moment with my cousin and I asked him, you know, how do you do this thing called work-life balance? He and his wife are both VPs and they got 2 girls and they're really active in their lives. And he's asked me one question. This is before I was diagnosed. He said, what would they say at your funeral? And this is 2014, August of 2014. I was diagnosed in June of 2015. And at first I didn't get it, but then it hit me that I was just existing. I wasn't living. I started to live, but even in my living, I didn't have purpose. And it wasn't until I was diagnosed with breast cancer, it was like, I get it now. Here it is. I'm walking in my purpose.
That was a similar experience. No, we always start and we jump right in and we forget to introduce ourselves. But for those of you that are to Baddies Talk Back, and for the rest of us, my name is Jasmine. Marissa is my wife. We are the founders of For the Breast of Us, which is the first inclusive community for women of color affected by breast cancer. We do these talks once a month. We also have an Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at For the Breast of Us. And we have a private Facebook group where you can connect with other women. Like Tiah said, even though we have that big group, the ladies in there are always to connect with women in their city if they can. There's almost 1,000 women in there. So we absolutely invite you to join us in that space. That being said, I think we can hop that in, but just want to make sure we introduce ourselves because we always forget.
Yeah, and we are both of us. I can't remember if you said it or not, Jasmine. Both of us are breast cancer survivors. I was diagnosed at 35. And Jasmine, you were diagnosed at 26.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, but just like what you said, Tiah, having that connection, connecting with other women, I know that that's one of the reasons why Jasmine and I founded For the Breast of Us, is that not being able to connect with other women that look like us. We didn't necessarily want to go to in-person groups just because it was a lot of older white women. But like you said, going to the cancer center, you would always see women that look like you that were getting treatment, and you're just wondering, so where are they going out to connect with each other or share their stories or just ask questions? And so I think that's the biggest reason why all of us kind of do our advocacy work, because we want to make sure that we're all connecting and have somebody to connect with, whether if you connect with 20 women or if you only connect with 2 women, it's still going to make a difference.
And for me, I think it was interesting because I think we're gonna jump right into the conversation about disparities and what the gaps are. But one thing I tell people is when we talk about being color, when we talk about being specifically Black women, or serving a community of color, we always talk about white privilege and the difference between that race is and how cultures differentiate the way that people navigate their experiences. But geography is a privilege, where you're located, your finances, that's a privilege. And so I know when I was going through proton therapy, I hardly saw any Black people there. And I knew that this was the optimal kind of treatment. They explained to me why it was the optimal kind of treatment. And so to me, it was all these experiences where I realized I'm the outlier, but then I also realized like, I'm being positioned, or I have an opportunity that other women are not getting. And how do I make sure that I'm educating the women around me so that we can have these kinds of opportunities, you know?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So I know one of our next questions that we had for you is, what are some of the greatest disparities facing Black women with breast cancer? Ricki or Tiah?
I'll go.
Okay.
So the whole concept of Black breast cancer is a discrepancy. So Black women are dying at a 42% higher rate than white women. A new stat came out a couple of weeks ago from JAMA Oncology that said Black women with breast cancer are 71% more likely to die of breast cancer. Black women under 35, like you guys, get breast cancer at twice the rate, die at 3 times the rate. Black women with breast cancer have a 39% higher rate of recurrence than white women. And I could keep going with the stats. So just the disease itself, it affects us in a different way. And I really think that why? No one has thought about it. There's racism built into the concept that we're dying in these crazy numbers, because it's been that way for years. And no one's addressed it. No one's thought about it until we brought it to the table. So, you know, just the fact, the numbers alone speak for the fact that there's racism built into how the world deals with Black women and breast cancer. And it's just not good. It's not right.
You know, I've had the opportunity on panels recently, and one of the things I've talked about is being, as a young woman and as a Black woman, I am in very underrepresented communities when it comes to breast cancer. And I talk about racism, and I talk about the guidelines. Now, like you said, Ricki, and I've been saying this for a while, I believe that they've been allowing Black women to die at this rate because it is not a new rate. Right. There was a time when we were at the same pace as white women. And they are only have been talking about it publicly within the last couple of years when the public pressure. There are some very large organizations that have only within the last couple of years started to address the mortality rate of Black women. And one of the things that I tell people often, besides like us being allowed to die at this, that even the guidelines, and I said this to an oncologist, and other reason I'm wearing black is too because I just watched Judas and the Black Messiah, which is an incredible movie, and I was feeling like really hyped, like I am a revolutionary, gonna make some stuff happen. I mean, when you think about, I'm talking to an oncologist, and she is a white woman, and I'm talking about implicit bias. And I'm talking about how even when doctors are looking, this is research, when doctors are looking at the exact scenario and the only thing that you change is the race, the Black patient is more likely to get the less effective treatment. This is research. And the response from that person was, well, it's not intentional.
What is that?
Right, but nothing's intentional. Nobody intentionally does something. You know? So,
it doesn't matter if it's intentional, if it's having a negative, you know what I mean? And so one of the things that we have all these different opportunities, Marissa and I are only 2 women. We have all these different opportunities and we're having our hands in all these different places. And one thing I remind people is that it's a lot to be diagnosed with breast cancer. It's a lot to put the onus on having to navigate somebody else's disease. Are you giving me all the information? Are you giving me all of my options? Do I know that I can tell you that I can hardly afford my medicine? I don't know that I can have the conversation with my doctor. So it is. And the other thing I talked about is the breast cancer guidelines. And I said, it does not factor in that Black women get breast cancer at an earlier age. And the response was, oh, but if it was only lowered a little bit, then lower it a little bit.
Lowered a lot. It should be lowered a less. 40 is too much for us to get a mammogram. And really, if you talk to the Black doctors, they will tell you should have a risk assessment at age 25. But that was too late for you, sweetheart, because you got at 26. So I mean, a lot of it too is just, in Black families, we don't talk about health. We don't talk about health. Well, under the table, so-and-so has the sugar or so-and-so sick, right? And then it becomes still a hush-hush conversation. And so we're not aware of all the things that we could be doing, not to necessarily prevent, but to take care of ourselves, like self-exams. And so I really believe that we need to teach young women at a young age. Like when you say, Mom, I want birth control, you need to know how to check your breast. And
I absolutely agree.
Dental checkup, you need to check your breast. Like it's not to be part of the kitchen table conversation in the household. And that's something that we hide from each other. And kind of say, I said, knowing her story is really important because, a lot of I don't have genetic mutations, but I still believe there could be something with triple negative.
Right.
Identified yet. What you said earlier, Jasmine, it's also the science of our bodies. I believe our bodies are different. And so even though we have treatments that could be comparable, I know women that did exactly what I did, took the treatment exactly what I had, exactly what I did. So I know I'm American here, right? But sometimes the medicine works and sometimes it doesn't because our bodies are different. And we don't know because we've never participated in research sufficiently to understand our biology.
But I think it's also even just laying the foundation with not even just women, but children in general, especially Black children or children of color, of just like having the routine of like, you go to the doctor every year, you get a physical. So then that way, once they get older, they know that this is what they are supposed to be doing and they proactively do it themselves. And then like you said, Ricki, for them also knowing their family health history. We don't talk about it. Nobody talks about your family health history. So then you have these kids who are growing up, or even just us in our generation who are growing up, and you have these genetic mutations or family histories of heart disease or diabetes, and you don't have anything about it. And then you're diagnosed and somebody's like, oh yeah, but so-and-so, your uncle has it. Right.
And to kind of jump in really quick, this is one of the reasons why in My Style Matters, we're big on the education piece. And I think that's important. And we've actually launched a program to educate young girls, middle school age. As soon as you get your period,
that's
you
what
need
I was
to be in our program. And we have a program and we're teaching girls how to check their breasts. As a matter of fact, next Thursday, we're doing a session on breast health and the lymphatic system, which a lot of us don't know, and like you said, we're not having these conversations. And so that's my goal. I'm more on the integrative prevention side, and I know we talk a lot about genetic mutations and things of that nature, but I also believe, kind of to Ricki's point, when it comes to, our health and in the Black family, I think not only are we not just with the genetic mutations, but we also inherit lifestyles.
Mhm.
You know, the foods that we eat, the cultural things. And so we're not eating healthy. And now in this pandemic, a lot of us aren't moving our bodies, you know. And so these are things that are really important. Today, I actually was on a panel, a congressional briefing, talking about fragrance and how fragrance impacts us, and the products that we as Black women are using. You know, it's really, really toxic, and it's affecting us. I mean, when you look at the sister study, you know, 60% of Black women, I mean, you look, a lot of us use hair dye, you know, and 60% Black women have face a 60% risk for breast cancer versus 8% in white women. That is unacceptable. And we are the biggest spenders when it comes to, you know, beauty products, personal care items, and all that stuff, but we're not educated. And when you go in our communities, what do you have on every corner? A beauty supply store. So that's my role in terms of the advocacy, because I think that there's a space for everybody. You know, some people focus on clinical trials, some people focus on survivorship. For me, you know, I don't want women to be diagnosed with this disease. So how can I help educate you before, you know, you get diagnosed, or to help prevent you or lower your risk from being diagnosed with this disease? So that's kind of the place that I sit in. And of course, you know, doing advocacy for people who have been diagnosed. And I believe in prevention. I believe it in 4 ways. You know, people who've never been diagnosed, people who have been diagnosed, how do you lower their risk of, you know, the disease metastasizing or spreading? People like myself who are finished treatment, you know, to prevent a recurrence. And then those who are metastatic, how do you help slow progression of disease down? So I truly believe that there are things that you can actually do to help lower your risk. From, you know, all of these things that I've just talked about. And yes, somebody just asked the question, are our programs virtual? Yes. And we would love to even have, you know, if you have been diagnosed with breast cancer, I really encourage you to use our programs to educate your families. You know, bring some women together and say, hey, listen, Tiah, we want to utilize your program, because my gift back to my family members is to educate them. You know, those who have supported me in my treatment, let me, instead of me giving them a thank you card, let me thank you with some life-saving information.
I love that, Tiah. And so I'll touch on, I was actually going to co-sign. I think as soon as we have periods, that's when we're starting to have those changes in our breasts. That's when we need to start teaching young girls to know what their bodies is, because I'm hearing stories about Black women being diagnosed at 16.
At 16. Yeah, I have a breastie right now that I'm working with, and she got diagnosed with triple negative at 19. She went through her treatment with NED. 3 months later, it came back, and she just finished her second round of treatment, her second kind of tour of duty at 21. So it can happen at a really, really young age. And I did a HBCU internship program in October for 6 weeks in the fall, and I had 5 interns. And we were Spelman, Howard, North Carolina A&T, Bowie State, and what am I missing? And at FAMU. And basically, we did a poll at the beginning of the internship, and the number of girls who had never heard of a self-exam or had heard of it was 0. I mean, it was like something.
They were how old at this point?
This is all college kids. 0. None of them knew how to do it. None heard of what are you talking about. And so we did the social media campaign. So by the time we finished, it was like 70%. So my interns were so happy that they were able to make an impact with their girlfriends. But a lot of the girls even had breast cancer in their family, an aunt or a mom or somebody, but they still didn't know anything about self-exams and breast health. It's frightening.
So that was the other thing that I was going to point out. And I don't know how many people realize this. So oftentimes if you're one of those weird people like us, diagnosed really young, they're like, let's check for a gene. Just because you don't have a gene does not mean that the information is not useful. Because if you are in like that first degree, and that's mother, that's daughter, that's sister, you can get documentation that allows your mother, your daughter, your sister the access to earlier screening. So that is still beneficial. The challenge with those tests is the cost of them. Right. And I think we'll probably work with someone to get more information about how we can cover the cost of those. But I absolutely encourage people to get those tests done and realize that it's helpful either way, and it's helpful for your family, whether or not you have the fact that you've been diagnosed does increase the risk of your family members. And then I want to touch on, before we go if somebody in the comments wants to know how to contact you. But okay, so here's the interesting thing about the screening. Someone said they argued with their GYN about the fact that Black women died in an alarming rate and about mammograms being done before 35 or 40. My next chapter of advocacy is really going to be focused on self-advocacy. I was explaining to someone the other day that we have all these programs that teach women how to advocate for other women, but we don't have a lot of programs teaching them how to advocate for themselves. So here's the thing about mammograms. Young women, Black women, tend to have denser breast tissue. So when you're around like under 40, mammograms are not very they're not very effective screening methods for dense breast tissue, which means it's harder for them to see if there's a tumor. So oftentimes you go and you'll be like me and you'll pass a mammogram. I passed a mammogram I passed a couple of mammograms actually in the same year. So this is where self-advocacy comes into play and us understanding what to ask for.
Right.
If you meet certain criteria, you can ask to have a breast MRI. I'm 25 and I didn't know there was a such thing as a breast MRI. All I knew was that my mammogram came back negative, and that's all I knew. They had the screening. So keep that in mind when you talk about lowering the age of screening. That's part of it, but also part of it is having effective screening methods, and that's still what's lacking.
Right. And it's definitely interesting because in different parts of the country, they definitely do both. Because here in Seattle, you get a mammogram and you also get an MRI. Like that's just the options. Like it's not even off the table, especially when they know that you're under the age of 40. They definitely do both. And so it definitely is that people need to self-advocate for themselves. I would say even if you are younger and because we do have dense breast tissue, that you definitely should get an MRI because it's going to pick up more than what a mammogram is, like what Jasmine said. And if your providers aren't offering that, you just need to say it. And, even for my sister, like I was diagnosed at 35. And as soon as I was diagnosed, her doctor just started doing mammograms and MRIs on her because she knew that I had breast cancer and I was diagnosed at a young age. So if you do have any close family members, whether it's sisters or cousins, moms or aunts, definitely talk to your primary care providers. And if they don't listen to you, talk to another provider, your gynecologist, and just say, hey, this is my family history. I feel like I need to have a mammogram every year. And if they don't listen to you, find somebody else that will, because there's no reason why you can't. And they can actually fight with your insurance companies for that to be approved.
Right. Well, Marissa, I want to share that there's a study that's going on that's actually looking at mammograms and how mammograms are being referred. So there's a standard of care, right? So they're telling women, every so often you need to get mammograms. But now what they're looking at is some women are getting too many mammograms. And so what they want to do is kind of like precision medicine. They want to customize it and tailor it just for you. If you have dense breast tissue, then maybe you need it a little bit more often. If you don't, and you don't have those high risks, then you don't need it as often. I mean, for me, they wanted me to get it every 6 months. And I was like, no, absolutely not. To me, that's too much exposure. Especially being diagnosed with triple negative, I didn't want that, and so I think that's important for this particular study. Unfortunately, it's not for those who have already been diagnosed with breast cancer, but for those who aren't, really consider enrolling in the study because I think it's a really good thing that they're looking at from a precision standpoint, kind of like precision medicine, targeted directly to the person and not necessarily because of the standard of care. Because it's not a one size fit all.
Not at all. Because like for myself, I get alternating mammograms and MRIs, but just because I get that doesn't necessarily mean that that's something that you should be getting, right? But that's just for me. That's because of my breast and because of my health, and that's something that I should be doing.
Yeah.
Marissa, I would also add, when you talked about your mom, your aunties, or whatever, if your dad has prostate cancer, or if there's prostate cancer in the male side of your family, that could be a sign of BRCA. And so you should also look at the men in your family as well. Beyonce probably had the gene from her dad. So don't exclude the men in our family either. Something in the chat about other genes. There's a lot of genes. There
are a lot of genes.
And I don't think we know the Black ones yet. I don't think we have.
Yeah, I know somebody asked in the comments, are there other gene mutations? And there definitely are a lot. Yeah. Hopefully that you go get genetic counseling and they can go over those with you. I know for myself, I have a gene mutation. It's called Lynch syndrome that predisposes you to colon and ovarian cancer. And now there are studies coming out showing that it actually predisposes women to breast cancer. And I remember when I was diagnosed telling my providers, like, I'm pretty sure that this is probably how my breast cancer popped up. And all of my providers said, no, there's no way, there's no studies. And I'm like, well, research me. Like, I'm here. You can research me and find out. And they were just like, no. And then a couple years later, it came out. And it's just like, and I'm just like, at that point, I was 35. So if you had started researching or looking more into it, think about all the other women who had genetic testing and knew they had Lynch syndrome at 30 when I found out I had it. And then they could start getting mammograms at that point.
Right.
And so that's why I popped up the link for Facing Our Risk, because they are on hereditary cancers, and you can find out what those other hereditary cancers are. One of our Baddie ambassadors, Dr. Alexia, she has a PAL-B2 mutation, which gives an increased risk for all kinds of cancer. So it's absolutely helpful information. And so we know, I think some of the conversation around those tests are like, I don't want to know, but you have to think beyond yourself. Honestly, you give your children, give your brothers, your sisters a fighting chance. And if it has to start with you, just allow it to start with you.
Yeah.
And I think it should be, when you get genetic testing, not to be afraid, right? So if it does come back that you have a mutation, some people will go to their doctor and maybe get on things like tamoxifen, or maybe, have surgery or what have you. But when women ask me that question because they are afraid, and I say, well, it should drive you to do something. It should drive you to at least start looking at ways that you can lower your risk. Maybe you don't want to take tamoxifen. Maybe you don't want to have, the surgery like Angelina Jolie or what have you. But really, start making some lifestyle changes and really understand the things that really influence. Because when we look at the genetic mutations, especially when it comes to BRCA mutation, we're talking 5 to 10%. So what about that 90%?
The way I look at fear,
right?
Where is it coming from? Yeah.
Yeah. Why are you in prison? Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Ricki, you, like me, recently joined the Metastatic Breast Cancer Alliance. Why was it important for Touch to be a part of that initiative?
Uh-oh.
Can you hear me?
There?
Yeah.
I don't know. I see frozen screens on Tiah.
Oh, we can hear you. I'm here. Okay, so Ricki, you recently joined the Metastatic Breast Cancer Alliance, like me. Why was it important for Touch to be a part of that initiative?
I think she's frozen still. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. JK, we'll come back to Ricki. And we'll pop her right back. So, Tiah, what are some of the greatest strides you've seen made in the last few years for Black women in the breast cancer community?
Yeah. I would definitely say, with TNBC, you're starting to hear more talk about it. More research is being done around triple negative breast cancer. When I was diagnosed, you only had, pretty much one option. It was AC, adriamycin, Cytoxan, and you had the Taxol. And that was it, surgery and radiation. But now you're starting to see other women take medications, post-treatment, like Xeloda or what have you, just to kind of help prevent recurrence. I am seeing that they are now starting to look more and more at that. And they're also doing more research around genomes and, genetics, in particular for Black women. So like you said, in this past, 3 years, maybe, you're hearing more and more discussions around disparities around Black women. So I am happy to hear that. It's sad that
taken so long.
This long. It's sad that it took this long, but I'm happy that it's starting to happen. So,
but the clinical trial numbers are still very, very low, and even in the last couple of years, we now have 3 kind of medications or treatments for metastatic triple negative, which is great. That's awesome because that's Tiah. And so I appreciate that we have Tecentriq and Trodelvy and now Keytruda for metastatic. What we don't have, though, is any treatment specifically for early stage triple negative, where you could, maybe save a life at an earlier stage. And so I actually spoke on a panel to the FDA last week to help to try to get Keytruda approved for early stage, and they delayed it again. And I said, well, how many people are going to die or get mets but by September when you decide to look at this again? So, the people making the decisions are not always working in our favor and don't realize that, there's a person connected to that tumor.
Right.
Hello.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's great, Ricki, because that goes back to the question I asked you right before you dropped off.
Sorry.
So you recently joined the Metastatic Breast Cancer Alliance. Why was it important for Touch to be a part of that initiative?
Because you die from metastatic breast cancer. And women are dying. I mean, clearly we need to fight all the fights. But I believe that we need to make an impact in this space. And again, Black women are dying at a 42% higher rate, and dying 77 risk of dying 71% higher. So I really feel it's important to be in a place where hopefully I can bring just some more data and knowledge to a forum that's working on metastatic breast cancer for Black women. So, and I think that the work that they're doing, they've got a couple of projects in place to help, kind of speak to our disease, but we need to do more. There's never enough time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Tiah, we brought you into a conversation. We embarked on our first research partnership. I think we'll be releasing the report from those initial conversations. Some of it is like mind-blowing. Some of it is incredibly sad, but it's very hopeful. And we hope that with this market research, we'll be able to inspire some people to really make a significant difference in the work that's being done. But you brought up the participation in clinical trials. And I was telling someone today that I think, and I want to ask you guys what you think some of the misconceptions are. I think that there's a misconception that Black communities of color, that they don't value clinical trials. In a lot of cases, I think we don't understand them. But then I also think that when you have a community that's struggling to meet basic needs, clinical trials just seems to be like another thing. And I don't necessarily think that's being taken into consideration when we're talking about recruitment and you're looking at some of the studies that have already been done when we're just talking about going to the doctor and Black women are saying like, I have to go to work to take care of my kids. That's why I didn't go to the doctor. So what do you guys think are some of those that are preventing Black women from achieving or accessing quality healthcare?
So all right, so you said one thing that kind of stuck out to me was that Black women don't value, or Black people don't value clinical trials. And I don't think that's what it is that we don't value. I go back to, we don't understand them. Right. They're not being talked about to us, right? We also know the history around clinical trials, and not just the history. I think sometimes we do get caught up on the history of like Henrietta Lacks and, all of these other things, the Tuskegee or what have you. But look at what's going on today. Look at what just happened last year. Look at what happened at the Capitol. So we're talking about trust issues, right? Yeah. Trust issues overall. It's not just in the healthcare field. It's all around us. I think those are some of the challenges as well, that we have to break those barriers down and work on building that trust. And we need more people that look like us in healthcare, right? Because we feel more comfortable when people look like us, because we do understand and know that there's bias, right? I mean, if you look in the maternal health space, look at what's happening in maternal health. I mean, it's really, really bad. And so when you bring it back to Black women and breast cancer and clinical trials, some of us do want to participate. I mean, think about the vaccination. A lot of people are getting vaccinated, right? So we just really need to educate more if we want to get people more involved in clinical trials and really help them understand that it's not only a drug that you take. Some of it's just the research on information, right?
Right. Clinical trials.
It could be a clinical trial, could be weight, a weight loss program or what have you, So I think it's really important. And our doctors need to have those conversations with us and be very transparent and give us the options. A lot of them are not giving us those options. They're not talking to us about those clinical trials. And the other part of that with the clinical trials is they need to include us. When they look at the inclusion and exclusion criteria, we already have comorbidities. And so that automatically rules us out for a lot of these clinical trials. So it's got to be, if we really want to see change, then we all have got to pull together and make sure this change happens. And I think, the work that Ricki is doing, the work that you guys are doing, or you ladies, I'm sorry, you baddies, you're doing is really helping to push for change. So it's just really important.
I would say that the messaging that's currently being used is not culturally sensitive.
Not at all.
So I found a study yesterday, you guys, from 2007. Okay, this is from 2007, NIH study. basically 37% of Black women versus 2% of white women prefer to be treated by a Black researcher.
Mm-hmm.
You're not seeing somebody that looks like you. You're afraid and scared. So I'm about to field this. I just got a pretty sizable grant from Genentech to field this study, which we're in the process of doing right now, to understand what's wrong with the current messaging, get over all the barriers of Henrietta Lacks, the placebo effect, and all the mistrust of it. And what is it in our psyche as Black women that's keeping us from engaging? And I really believe it's a control thing. We are all these badass control freaks. We wear our capes. We're the helicopter moms, the helicopter grandmas. We control everything in our lives. And so you take us out of that environment where we're like badasses and put us in this place where everything is foreign to us. And 80% of patients go to a community hospital. And what does your normal look like? Your normal healthcare looks like you walk into the clinic, there's babies crying, the people behind the desk may not be right nice because they're underpaid and overworked, and but that's your normal. And then you put me in a car, drive me across town to this beautiful white doctor's office where nobody looks at me. There's beautiful roses on the desk, and the people are so nice and sickening. You're like, wait, this is not my norm. So why am I going to let you stick a needle in my arm in that environment?
Absolutely. It's so interesting because I recently joined the Mayo Clinic SCORE. And I was talking to someone that invited me to apply to be a part of that initiative. I'm the only Black woman on there, and this is their national council, and the youngest person. And I told them, they said that at first they didn't think that they had Black patients that wanted to be part of this. And I said, well, for one, I know the first time that I walked into a clinic, I am educated, I have great insurance for whatever that's worth. But I walked in and it was off-putting to me. I felt like I was in the middle of Get Out, and it was nothing wrong. It was classical music. It was everyone's really nice, and I didn't see anyone that looked like me. And I know my mom and I were having the same. We kind of looked at each other like, "Are we supposed to be here?" Like, But then you think about that, so it's kind of sad because when we're looking at this, and I cannot wait for this research to come out because I think it's going to get everyone's wheels turning. One of the things they talked about is how some women were saying they'd rather be treated at the rinky-dink hospitals because that's where the people that look like them at. But those aren't often the hospitals that are doing the research that are going to offer you the access to clinical trials. And so when Tiah talks about the importance of having doctors that look like, when we looked at, and this is the early conversations, the interviews and the data that was from those initial interviews, one of the reasons that Asian women have more trust in doctors is because they have so many Asian family members that work in healthcare.
Right.
Yeah.
They have so much access to people that look like them engaged in healthcare.
Right.
And so we can't underestimate the importance of representation and the importance of being culturally sensitive. And even when they came out with the COVID vaccine, me, an advocate being trained, to me, it was not enough to have celebrities go on TV and take the vaccine.
Right.
I wanted to understand why it was safe after 2 months of surveillance.
Right.
And nobody was saying that. So I had to learn that on my own. Why is it safe after 2 months? Because most long-term side effects are okay, that makes sense to me. But if you don't explain that to people, how do you expect them to understand? So when the information came out that the placebo, and this is the other thing, that most clinical trials are testing, especially if they're cancer clinical trials, they are testing the standard treatment and a new treatment. It's not very often that they're testing nothing or a placebo.
It's never that they're testing nothing. It's always standard of care.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when it came out that the placebo for the COVID vaccine clinical trial was saline, it was kind of insulting to me to see the media say, well, duh, it's saline, and see other white advocates like, well, duh, what else would it be? It's saline. And I'm saying, so if you're a Black patient with no understanding of clinical trials, that sounds really Tuskegee, doesn't it? Right? Mm-hmm. But if you are a Latina patient and your family, your culture has a history of forced sterilization. Women that thought they were going in for birth control ended up getting forcefully sterilized. Maybe saline sounds like, oh God, well, at least it wasn't something bad. But that's what I mean, where we don't have that cultural lens. We just assume that everybody's at the same level, and that's not the case. And it's a disservice to the communities that need to be involved the most in these projects.
Right.
You know, my ideal world is if I had a lot of money, I would set up a clinical trial operation for Black people in every major city. So this beautiful Victorian house in a Black neighborhood, and there's little flowers in the garden, and you walk in, and the grandmother meets you at the door. She takes your kids to the playroom. You can bring your kids. You walk into the living room. She puts a crocheted blanket over you that she made herself. She gives you a cup of mint tea with the mint that she grew in her garden. The fireplace is going, and Luther's playing in the background, and she gives you the shot.
Well, you know that's not gonna work in Atlanta. You know you gotta have the trap music in Atlanta.
Right. I'm like, but that's the fantasy. But we can't, like, we don't have that fantasy. So even like what people are saying in the comments, it's like a lot of us go to community centers, right? A lot of us don't get our cancer care or whatever type of care in one of these big research hospitals. So one of the big things that I would even say, it's like, if you have been diagnosed with breast cancer or any type of cancer, you should be imploring the people in your family to participate in research, because we need to be researching people who have not been diagnosed, because that's where you want to get. You want to get to people who have not been diagnosed versus just the people who have been diagnosed, because we want to find out, why are people being diagnosed? So that's where you need to start. You need to talk to your cousins, your aunts, your sisters, everybody, and tell them to be involved in research as well. Yeah. I would also say, if you can, be on an IRB, an institutional review board, to where they're reviewing these clinical trials that are coming up, because you can look at what they have and what their protocols are, and then say, hey, you don't have enough Black women in this study. Why are you not reaching out to Black women? I don't feel like this clinical trial should be pushed through if you do not have enough of this particular group in there. And they can stop that, because you can get more people to vote with you, and they break that down. I mean, they'll break down even the consent form. If it doesn't look like it's right, they'll stop it, and it just won't go through. So those are little things. But even if you do go to a community center and they don't do research, talk to your doctor and be like, who is it that you talk to at a research center that I can go and do this research with? Because yes, they're not going to do research at that community center, but I'm sure they know a provider over at the cancer center that does do research that you can talk to. Those are just little things that we can do. And it's sad that we have to take that into it, but it's like what Jasmine said, it's your self-advocacy that you have to do for yourself, because if you don't do it for yourself, nobody else is going to do it.
Yep. I have 14 interns that I'm bringing in. And so half of them are going to focus on self-advocacy and self-exams, and half of them are focusing on clinical trials and how to talk to their families about it. So they're learning at a young age. It has to be something we teach at a young age. So I'm like trying to get that conversation happening, because I really believe the young people can be a conduit into the families to talk about clinical trials. Guess where? At the kitchen table. And you know what? You have to talk about it before you're sick. You can't wait till you're sick. It should be a conversation that you talk about, again, like going to the dentist, like getting a checkup. So it should be something that's in your vernacular, in your space, in your head, before someone needs one, right? So it's not a hard conversation to get to.
Yeah. I mean, even the IRBs, like I'm on an IRB, and, yesterday we had a meeting, and one of the studies where it had to be like a stool or a saliva test. And even the consent, they didn't say what type of test you were going to be doing. And it's like, well, no, we're not going to push this forward until you actually put in there the type of sample that the patient is going to have to be, leaving. Because then if you go see somebody that works for the clinical trial and then they pull the wrong form and you're supposed to leaving a saliva and then they do a stool, then it automatically cancels you out. So it's little things like that we can all definitely make a difference with.
Yeah, I'm starting a trial right now at Georgetown, just because I want to participate in a trial, and it's about the impact of stress on breast cancer survivors. And so, so some of the exclusionary things to me were like, when you can go, like, can you come for blood work at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday? Well, I work for myself, but I can, but if I couldn't, would I be kicked out of the trial because I have to work? So even stuff like that. But I'm actually going to go through this trial and blog about it, because I want to experience. I want to walk the talk and blog about it, so I can talk about. And then at the end say, okay, you guys, here's where you screwed up, or here's where you could have done better in terms of really engaging Black women. So I'll let you know.
Yes, make sure give us that blog too, so we can post it on our site as well.
Absolutely. So, ladies, like, this was such an awesome conversation. We are in like the last 5 minutes, but I'm so thankful that you guys took this hour out to talk to us and to engage with our community and to like really drop some gems. So, before we leave, I want to ask you guys, what projects are you most passionate about working on? Tiah, you mentioned that you're starting to jump into personal care products. Are there any other projects that you'd like to share with the baddies?
Yeah, well, so as I mentioned before, we're doing our breast health education, starting with young girls this year. I've set a goal to reach 1,000 women. I know that's a stretch goal, but I truly believe that it can happen. I mean, just so far, I think we've had maybe about 300 women that we've touched already. So I think that's a easy win. But it's not even about the numbers, really. It's about getting the word out there, really educating women about breast health, because we don't know. Our doctors aren't talking to us about this. Women don't even know about getting the clinical exams, from their, from their gynecologist, their OBGYN. And for the women who don't even have an OBGYN, who don't have access to care, there are things that you can do at home to be monitoring yourself, to really get to know your norm. And so that is one of the biggest things that I'm passionate about and I'm focused on this year. We're also going to be doing in April, we're going to be having an event where we're going to be talking about prevention, and we're going to have a celebrity breast surgeon on the panel. We're going to have someone who's a dietitian or nutritionist, and we're also going to have someone in the environmental space that's going to actually talk about the environmental factors that are affecting us as Black women. And everything is focused, solely on Black women. It's relevant to everybody, but I want to really focus on Black women because I feel like truly, if we can resolve the issues of Black women, we resolve the issues of everybody.
Mm-hmm. And I really think that's facts. Yes. And I think we've seen that in almost everything. If you can do civil rights for Black people, then civil rights for everybody else. You know what I mean?
Yep. So if anybody's interested, definitely get plugged in with our breast health education. I really would love to, connect with you and your family members. This is important. We're not having the conversation. And because we're not having a conversation, many of us are being affected by it. And we could, either, catch it early if cancer is there, to be preventative, or just monitoring your breast overall and just really understanding what does that look like, so tune in next Thursday, 7:00. I have it all on my Facebook page or what have you. They'll have to register. We're not going to go live because of the sensitivity of the information that's going to be shared, but we're really going to hone in on things that are being taught in the white community and not being taught in the Black community. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking forward to this workshop next Thursday.
Thank you, Tiah. Yep. And if you want to do a shout out for your social handles, please let them know where they can go after this.
Yes, at My Style Matters. It's our My Style Matters 2, because I messed up on Twitter. So it's at My Style Matters 2 on Twitter, My Style Matters on Facebook, and you can reach me at info@mystylematters.org. And our website, I think you just put it up, www.mystylematters.org. And we're also on Instagram at My Style Matters.
Love it, love it, love it. All right, Ricki, what are you working on? What are you most excited about right now?
Well, I'm excited about my clinical trial research, and I really want to change the game on the messaging, and I hope that what we uncover in this research will really impact the whole breast cancer ecosystem in terms of how to talk to Black women about clinical trials. Unless we get the science right, we're going to keep dying, and so I really am working hard to get that right. And to me, it's again a marketing challenge. And the other thing is talking to kids, young women, and really getting young women involved in the conversation, like Tiah is. And Tiah, we should connect your middle schoolers with my college students, and
absolutely
talk to work with these HBCU students to get them having these conversations and being like the conduit into their families to talk about breast health.
And Ricki, I cannot wait until we have the combination of our research out there. Other things I'm really excited about is that research is being led by Black women for Black women and communities of color. And I think that is just so
good. Have you heard of Project SOAR? Do you know about Project SOAR, SOAR?
Yes.
That Carrie Touch is doing. So she is also doing a huge study, and she's going to have her results as well. So let's talk about this, because I really, we're going to publish something. Let's put it all together and build the story for the ecosystem. So let's do this thing.
And I would say even it's great that we're reaching out to the HBCUs, but let's not also forget about, you know, the Black and brown people who are at PWIs, because even though they are there at those institutions, they're still being left behind as well. So we should definitely be reaching out to them as well, I would say.
We have one intern from PWI too. But
And so what we have some, we can make some connections for you, Ricki, because I think it would also be great for that initiative. Because their whole thing is about young women and breast cancer education. So let's make that connection.
Great. See my shirt?
Yeah.
Right?
And Ricki, where can people connect with you outside of this side?
All of our social media is at Touch BBCA. We're touchbbca.org, Ricki at Touch BBCA, or Ricki Dove on Twitter. You know, text me, tweet me, whatever, I'll respond. And, you know, if anyone needs help, you know, call us. You know, we're here to figure out how to help you, you know, and we don't always have all the answers. We can call somebody. I'll call Dr. Mo, whatever. So, and on our show, you know, we're talking about comorbidities now. We're talking about everything the doctor is in Wednesday nights at 6:00 on blackdoctor.org.
Mm-hmm.
Well, ladies, that is it for this evening. If you are, wait, go ahead, Tiah.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention. So we've teamed up with Breast Cancer Prevention Partners and SafeCosmetics.org. We have a campaign going on right now where we're asking Lady Gaga and Rihanna to really consider changing their formulas for their makeup products because they have carcinogens in them.
Right.
So if you guys, you know, go out, sign the petition. We love them. We love Riri.
Right.
But again, we need her to love up on us a little bit more. So we're really asking them, especially as Black women who wear makeup, you know, to really consider changing the formula so that we can not be affected by their products and still continue to support them. So go out on my page and sign the petition.
Great. Do that. We'll share it.
So, ladies, that's it for tonight. If you are a woman affected by breast cancer, you can go to our Facebook page and join the Breast Cancer Baddies Facebook group. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at For the Breast of Us. Our website is breastofus.com. And with that, our guests, please stay on so we can make sure we do our photo. And then everybody else, good night.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye.
You guys are badasses. I love you.
Thank you.
All right, let me